different perspectives are present when they talk to the different sources and people in the conflict. And as they talk to different people, as you see here, they talk to different people, and you have like, they're saying something in white, and then you have two choices. And if you think that they are saying something interesting, then you will use the quote button. So you have to kind of recognize when they're telling you something that fits with your article perspective and that is newsworthy. Furthermore, you have to be careful because up here there is a trust meter, and if you're not careful with what you kind of say to them or what you ask them, then they will tend to distrust you, and they will be less likely to share information, share sources, share new locations with you. So, for example, if you walk up to Israeli soldier and tell him about how they're occupying Palestine and they're all child murders, then it will be very unlikely that he will actually share more information with you. On the other hand, if you completely, throughout all of the interview, just, is very friendly and very, accommodating, then you won't necessarily get some of the more juicy stuff in the end. So in that sense, you have to navigate between the sources, and you have to be able to recognize and dig out the information in the game. I'll show you a bit more. This is from the first mission where Khaled is suspected of being a terrorist and dragged out, and obviously the soldiers has one story and Khaled has another. This is the article interface that kind of is the debriefing of the game, where you use your quotes and you select some pictures and you get a score based on how well you gathered quotes and how well you used them. This is one thing we want to expand both for the Palestine and the Latin one when we go online, because it's very much about this debriefing and working with the contents and the experience that you get in the virtual environment. So you could say expanding the journalistic experience. And these two ones are actually the 2 or 3 only violent incidents in the entire game, but it is kind of hard to make Israeli-Palestinian conflict without violence. As you might see, there goes the editor down in the corner. Sorry for the spoiler. So if you kind of break down the gameplay, there are definitely some overlaps with Latin. You play the freelance journalist, where we want the student to be critical, gather information, take on different perspectives. So we want them to take on this role. The goal is basically to get the best article. The means are to find informants, gain their trust, get their story, dig out and identify the best quotes, and use these quotes in an article finally. If you do this well, your journalistic rating rises, and you go from a newbie to a Pulitzer award-winning superstar with a corner office. So that is very basically the gameplay, and obviously the idea is very much to have a very close alignment between the learning goals and the game goals. So in order to win this game, you have to have a very sound understanding of what quote should I dig out, and that kind of means that I have to understand what angle I'm pursuing, who's saying what and why, and what is the story behind all of this. Otherwise, I can't win the game. On the same hand, this is also what we want them to actually learn. We want them to appreciate different perspectives. We want them to be able to recognize some of the key issues, what is newsworthy, what is not, what is important, what is not important. So in that sense, there's a very, very, very good overlap between these. And in some ways, you can say that the educational game design between Palestine may to some extent be stronger than the educational game design between Latin. But it kind of comes down to that it's very different regions and themes that you have here. So it's more difficult for the Latin one to make this frustration, because it's a bit more black and white in Latin. It's going to feel forced if you, for example, have a hacienda owner that using slave labor. It's very hard to present him in a beneficial way, you can say. Even if you can make him talk like, he presents his arguments and the way he sees things, any European will kind of recognize very quickly that he's a problematic guy. Whereas in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's much more gray scales, which makes it's a different and more interesting experience in some ways. The way that we tested a number of ways of actually using Palestine and also Latin inside classrooms, and the best way to do it was really to have this set up, and we tried to build material that supported the different processes. So initially you have a short teacher talk where you have a textbook maybe. You also have a topic overview from us that kind of eases you into the conflict as a teacher or a student. When you kind of have this very, very basic, rudimentary understanding of what the conflict is, you go on to let the students play the game. And what's important when they play the game is very much to explore perspectives, experience issues, and they have a guide to kind of help them along playing the missions, if there's difficult words or what they should focus on, and a little bit of background information. When they've played the game, it's important that they go into group discussions and they have some task, and they write an open-ended essay based on what they've experienced. And then finally you have the debriefing and evaluation. And this is actually very much the same process that we have for both Latin and Palestine, and it's definitely the best way to do it. And it's quite difficult to squeeze in a double lesson. The best experiences are probably with kind of taking out a day and then using that on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like a virtual field trip, you can say, because you have a bit of time to start up, you have time to play the game, and then you have time for debriefing in the same kind of flow. Whereas if you kind of play the game Monday, discuss it Friday, and then you have follow-up, it becomes more difficult. It gets more kind of fragmented. But I guess that's a problem with the entire educational system. So, if we kind of look at the educational layers, we try to kind of strive to have different things for different educational approaches. We're not really that interested in initial layer, the content layer, you can say, because to be quite frank, content is not best delivered by the games we develop, and maybe not even by games in general. Pushing the entire history of Europe is quite difficult to do in a game. It's going to be very heavy and to digest. But of course, as you engage with people, as you talk to people, you will get a lot of information about the conflict. You will learn about the key actors, the cities down there, how many people are killed, etc., etc. But it's maybe not the place where you actually, you can say, stand aside from other medium. The next level that we have is that we try to have different themes that run through the different missions that students see from different perspectives. And in this game, it's human rights, terrorism, and the media's role. So in all missions, even if they're about different things, they will all have an element of human rights, or how the media kind of plays into this equation, or that terrorists can be seen from different sides and have different meanings and different dynamics behind them. The third level that we have is trying to develop, you can say, what is called skills and methods, which is very much about trying to give students an understanding of what role sources